Brian, you're making me smile.
We were fortunate we had an ugly sweater picture day today.
It's perfect. Oh, it's got a reindeer. Oh, that's not really ugly though. It's more happy.
Nah.
Jen saying so.
They're in the next room decorating the tree, so with their ugly sweaters.
Well, I think that we are all here and it is 6:30. So we can go ahead and get started. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Ms. Chrysler?
Here.
Mr. Hairston?
Here.
Ms. Mooring?
Here.
Ms. Pickle Antonio?
Here. If you'll all please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are really not any appropriate words for a situation that should never happen. So I would ask that all of you please join me in a moment of silence as we remember Noah Long. Thank you. I know this has been another very difficult week for our school district community in the midst of what has been a very difficult year. And this is our last school board meeting this calendar year. It's always, I don't know, it's always struck me as interesting how the calendar year and the school year line up, because before I had kids, calendar year turning was always such a momentous feeling, I think. And after having kids, it's almost like you get two opportunities, to turn that calendar. I guess I just want to acknowledge that this is the month of December. I think that we are coming up on what I know is a much needed break for a lot of our staff and our families. And I hope, and I guess from the board, want to wish all of our staff and all of our families in the community a peaceful and healthy holiday season. I hope that everybody can kind of take the next couple weeks to pause and enjoy some time with their families and recharge. And even though it is the middle of a school year, we still have an opportunity to turn a calendar page. And I just hope that we all get that needed pause from the next couple weeks, because I know, like I said, I know our staff and our families just really, really need a period of some peace and calm. I am going to stop freestyling, I guess, and go to the actual board agenda. Is there a motion to approve minutes from the November 6th special Board of Education meeting, the November 17th Finance and Facility Committee meeting, and the November 19th regular board meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Any corrections or changes to those minutes from anyone? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring.
Yes.
We are on school and community reports and presentations, and I think I saw, Jason, you're here, aren't you? Sorry, I'm on my phone and I can never see everybody, but okay, Jason is here. We are going to start with our Student Council President, Jason Raymond.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see you again. I'm sure we can all agree it has been quite a semester. Usually, like these past 3 years, high school has really flown by, but like I felt like this one has went a little too slow for all of our likings. I wanted to start with some cool stuff that Student Council is doing, and that sharing with the school. Currently, we're having a letter drive in which we are writing in friendship during this tough holiday season to nursing homes, because they've been so isolated since the pandemic started, and it is so important that they know that they're still a valuable part of our community during this holiday season especially. We're also starting to draft plans for our bathroom beautification project, which will create a sense of safety for all students in all corners of our buildings, and hopefully one day in all corners of our district. We also plan to launch our You Are Not Alone campaign with that as well, create more mental health resources. Really now more than ever, it's always been important, but I think we need to push that envelope way more than we do, and we need to stop waiting for the right moment, because the right moment is now. And we're still making sense of Gahanathon, planning to host a Week of Miracles during the last week of January, the first week of February, whether we're in person or not. The pandemic has brought a lot of new health issues, but these kids still have cancer. And if they're pushing on, we have to find a way to persevere for them as well. And that's what we've got going on in Student Council for the winter. as well as something that was brought to my attention. I'm sure at this point, you guys are all aware of the incident with the Black Lives Matter sign being taken down in one of our elementary school buildings. The sign made a student feel safe and heard. And after this issue happened, I personally received a letter in the mail regarding the incident, asking if I could advocate for Black and brown students. The letter coming to my home address illustrated to me the fact that the community felt that it was not being handled properly or taken seriously. Being reached out to made me ask myself who's fighting for students of color in our district and who can they talk to. In response to this, in the new semester, we're working with NHS, Student Council, as well as other fellow students to create a safe place for Black and brown students. We see people promote for safe spaces for LGBT community, women empowerment, and empowerment of kids with disabilities within our schools. And it is time that the young Black and men and women in our district get to see it too. I have a hand in design. I love to draw, and I'll be working with Swag to create posters and decals and maybe a possible t-shirt sale to raise money for Black Lives Matter organizations. Or using the money to fuel programs like Diaspora and Multicultural Club within our school. Every student deserves to feel safe, and there's always the question about what about these minorities? What about these minorities? But it is about who's being attacked at the moment. When a student needs a Band-Aid in class, not every student gets a Band-Aid. It's the student that gets hurt, and that student gets taken care of, and that student gets attended to. And everyone deserves to feel safe. It's not a political organization, propaganda, or conspiracy. It is simply a fact. Black Lives Matter in itself is a complete sentence. And to refute that would mean that part of you might believe that we don't. And so I will be working with my fellow president, Kayla Ferris, because we have to do something, and we have to promote safety, and it comes from the students. And we've seen it before. We've seen work in the high school spread throughout the district. And I believe once we spread that diversity and inclusivity here, that the rest of the district will follow suit. Teachers will feel more safe following that message, as well as students feeling more safe to have these conversations in the classroom. There's even this book club among teachers that is trying to get a school-wide read of the book stamped by Jason Reynolds to truly understand why the phrase Black Lives Matter rocks so many of us to our core, why it offends so many people, to truly understand that. There's already too much pressures, and there are Black men my age, my size, that look like me that are being shot down in Columbus, right around us, and it's happening. So if we can create that space in school, I and other students I know are going to do everything in our power to make that happen. Students already have to measure up to so much in this world. The pandemic happened and so much is shut down, but students are still being asked to measure up to what we've always measured up to. And we're gonna make it a safer space. It's the microaggressions that I think some of you have no idea the amount of backhand racism that a lot of students go through and are told to just keep their mouths. That's what I have on that. I'm sure you'll be hearing about that in the next month again once we move forward, and hopefully we may be back in school, and once we continue to move forward with that moment. And I also want to recall the week of the strike, and pertaining to the news of Noah Long's passing. I asked myself many questions and wondering maybe if I had helped to solve the strike a bit earlier, or maybe if my words were stronger, he would have had more time in school to feel safe and loved and had someone to reach out to. This morning, in fact, another former Gahanna Lincoln student, he left his freshman year, passed as well, and that's 2 within the same week. And meaning in the strike, Mr. Campbell did release the message, quote, "Look, I don't want my community to lose a child or teacher to COVID-19. That would be crushing, but it won't change the nature of our community. We've lost precious children and teachers in past years, and we are still family. And I advise you to listen to that message in the context of today and yesterday and everything that's happened this week. It really wasn't okay then. And it's not okay now. And since then, one of our student leaders, Haley Maharan, made a petition asking for the resignation of Mr. Campbell, and it's garnered over 1,500 signatures. And there's been no communication from that. We haven't heard anything from Mr. Campbell himself or the board, or even a simple apology. And I got this message from Haley Maharan today. She wrote me the message, quote, "Mr. Campbell does not represent the community he serves. He uses his platform to spread hateful, false statements about marginalized groups. His words are detrimental beyond explanation, and there is no defense for the things he has said, reshared, and continued to perpetuate into our community. Gahanna is strong because of our diversity and people who live here, the same people Mr. Campbell repeatedly speaks ill of and views as commodities. Gahanna is no stranger to loss, and we are again grieving as a school, as a community, and as a family. Mr. Campbell has shared his thoughts on the impacts of student loss before and has made it clear that he sees it as something we will all get over. And I can say firsthand, we won't, we haven't, and we will never get over it. His previous statement is a blatant dismissal of the lives we have lost and the relationships that cannot be replaced. A man who believes students and teachers are expendable is not a man who should have a part in the decisions that impact students and the community. A man who does not have respect, consideration, and sympathy for each and every person in our community, regardless of who they are, should not be a part of our school board. He does not represent or stand for the ideals Gahanna Jefferson aims to teach, and the ideals that have been instilled in me by the outstanding educators I've grown up learning from. For all of this and more, I believe Matthew Campbell should resign from Gahanna." And that is, end quote, of Haley Maharan. And this needs to be addressed. You know, as student council president, I'm accountable for who represents me, and they, vice versa, hold me accountable as well. Many of us are in elected positions here, and we need to see in our higher leadership if you truly represent our district. I sit here in my tie because I represent a district. I know a lot of people are looking up to me as a 17-year-old kid, and as an adult, there is a certain responsibility that you have that I simply really can't grasp yet just because of my age. But we sit here in an elected roles, and students and teachers are tired of losing people. I'm not going to lose anyone else if it's in my reach, if it's in my control. And the words that you use are in your reach and very well in your control. And the ways we handle these situations, this Black Lives Matter scandal that we've had, very well is in your reach and within your control. And that in fact, you may be a key factor in losing somebody. I truly believe that the way we are handling these things are key factors in why we lose people, and why we lose people to a system and their own stereotypes and whatnot. So that is all I have for you today. Again, next semester, we are going to be working harder than ever to ensure the safety of our students in every way we can, because students believe in it. So, and we deserve to feel safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Do any board members have any questions to ask of Jason? Okay. Jason, I just had a question for you about the student group that you said you're starting at the high school. I didn't know, do you have communication at all in your role as council president with the middle school and high school level at all? Or are you hoping that that just naturally kind of spreads, or are you, do you have, I guess, we don't have, I think at the middle school level, we have elected council, but not at the elementary level.
I do know that they have their student councils, and we do hope to reach out to them as well. I know they have things to do as well, so that's why we are planning to start the initiative here and hoping that people join our Calvary throughout what we do. But it starts with us, and then we can only hope that people support us and put 100% of our hearts behind our message.
Thank you, Jason. We are, I don't know if Sharon Jason, I know you know this. You're more than welcome to stay. Please don't feel obligated to stay either. Either way is perfectly okay. I don't know if Sharon Tomko is
Earl?
here. Yes. Do you
Sharon,
have an update?
she did send me an update.
Okay. Mrs. Mooring, do you want to give the update from Gahanna Jefferson Education Foundation up here, and then we can skip it down at the bottom of the agenda?
I sure can.
Thank you.
Sharon asked me to share that the website for the February 27th, 2021 virtual Gahanna Gala is up and running. Registration will be free this year, but there will be VIP opportunities if you'd like to invest more. Look for information to be distributed in the next few weeks on how to register. The theme for the gala is Twilight in the Tropics. We are working with our team of volunteers to gather silent auction items. And we are working with Mark Lowry, the instructor for the GLHS TV studio, for the production of the virtual Gahanna Gala. In return, JGEF will make a donation to the program, and we're looking forward to that collaboration. On workforce development update, on Wednesday, February 10th, there will be a virtual career fair and hiring event. We are partnering with Dawson, and it will provide an opportunity for businesses and colleges to connect with students who are exploring career options and pathways, as well as family and community members that are interested in immediate job opportunities. Currently, we are working on getting business participation, and in January, we will begin marketing the event to our students, parents, and community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Any board members have questions about Gahanna Jefferson Education Foundation? Okay. I know I did see Bethany Rack here, who is here on behalf of Gahanna Jefferson Education Association.
Hi, and I have to apologize in advance because my webcam is not working. So I was on a meeting yesterday and it worked just fine, but for whatever reason this evening it is not recognizing me. So like I tell my first graders, as long as you can hear me, that's okay. So I'm sorry you have to stare at a black box with my name in it.
It's okay, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Bethany Rack, and I teach first grade at High Point. This is my 8th year in Gahanna and my 16th year teaching, but I am also a Gahanna graduate of the class of 2001 and serve as one of the two building reps for High Point. I do want to start out by sending our deepest condolences from all GJA members to the family and friends, teachers, and classmates of Noah Long. It was just, like Beryl said, there's just no words. It's very heartbreaking to hear that we lost a student in our family. GJEA members have been working hard to move quickly and adjust instruction to serve all of our students during the transitions from one model to the next in the last few months. Like I'm sure with all of you, it's been a trying time for all of us, but the teachers and related services have done everything in our power to make sure the students of Gahanna in the best way, we're serving them in the best way possible to making sure that learning is happening on a daily basis. Right now, we are also in the midst of our annual collection for GRIN. We will be able to share the total amount that we have donated during our report next month. I know typically we know in December our total amount collected, but being distance right now, a lot of the collections are coming through mail and coming in virtually. So we'll have an update next month. But we do want to thank Mr. Barrett for supporting these efforts each year. We know that this organization directly impacts the students we serve every day. So we are excited to partner with GRIN once again. At High Point, we more recently have had conversations during some of our staff meetings in response to the board's recent policy against or regarding anti-racism. Our conversations involved reviewing the policy as a staff and identifying keywords or phrases that really spoke out to us. And so we want to thank the board for your work in putting together this very important statement. And we look forward to continuing that critical conversation on future professional development days and staff meetings. So again, like was mentioned at the beginning, we want to wish everyone a safe and healthy break and a happy new year. And we're hoping that 2021 brings us happiness and good health. So thank you so much. And again, I'm sorry that I'm having some device issues.
Thank you, Bethany. Any board members have any questions for Mrs. Rack about Gahanna Jefferson Education Association? Okay, before we do the committee reports, we have a board item for action down in the financial business section that we will talk about when we get to that section, but I know that Mr. Tripp is here with us now. And Mr. Tripp, I don't want to have you have to wait to sit through our whole board agenda. So I think if everybody's okay with it, I would like to take the opportunity to thank you on behalf of the board for the very generous gift that you and your wife, Ellen, are making to the school district. Mr. Tripp, it's for the gift that you have already given to the school district.
We filed the deed and the auditor lost it. Literally lost it. It's like if you filed the deed to sell your home or buy a home and somebody filed the deed, everything that you did was for naught because the deed didn't go through. So we just filed another one today.
Oh
and
my goodness.
We did it electronically rather than in person. And we're hoping that this one will go through so that you guys will have the property.
Well,
that's really where I am.
We are incredibly grateful for the generous gift. Mr. Tripp, I know you wrote us a beautiful letter that kind of described how you and your wife came to own the property. It's for anyone who's watching, it's a piece of property that is near our High Point Elementary and Middle School East School buildings. I think if I remember right, it's about 30 acres of wooded land that Mr. Tripp and his wife are donating to the district to be used for outdoor education for our students. It is something, like I said, I know I and the rest of us are extremely grateful for, excited to have. Just want to thank you for that generosity.
You're all welcome. Because, yeah.
Could I just read a sentence from the letter?
Sure. Yes.
Sure.
It is beautifully.
Are you an English teacher?
He was.
Well, no, but I think it's beautifully written. So the easement was born of our desire to preserve and protect all these trees and weeds, and now it is time to designate the next caretakers. One may own land, but really the land, as one appreciates it, comes to own you. At least that's what happened to us.
That's true.
And there's a certain poetry to that. And Bethany, if you're wondering where this is, so Bethany, you teach there, and it's right behind, it's the woods right behind the grass, behind the playground at High Point. And
I'm shaking my head, yes.
And then he goes on, I won't read much more, but he goes on to, or Ellen and Tom go on to say that although the land is constricted in its development, it is not at all prohibited from being used as the foundation for hands-on and feet to environmental learning by all students in the district. While there may be no construction Within the conservation easement, the natural elements present here will offer a myriad of opportunities for students to experience nature in its natural state, vernal pools, tall, magnificent trees, wildlife in abundance on days of heavy rainfall, a natural water retention system that offers release of rainfall that accumulates with its moderating effect, thus preventing some downstream flooding, woods that offer carbon sequestration that compensates for more than 110 motor vehicles on roads, walking paths that access all these features and more. So I'm holding this away because I don't have powerful enough glasses tonight, but this was just an amazing, almost poetic letter. And so thank you very much. This is,
Steve, I got to tell you, this is the results of Ellen and I living there for more than half a century. You live in one place for more than half a century, which is what most Americans did a century ago, but they don't any longer. So we're unique, and we have a unique perspective. I don't know if anybody will appreciate it, but I know you'll have an opportunity to introduce your kids to the woods. And a man wrote a book, and I refer to it later in the letter, called The Last Child in the Woods. If there aren't any kids growing up in the woods, or at least learning about it, there won't be any woods left in the future. So that's what we hope will happen.
and I think during the pandemic, we've learned even more than ever that being outside is important, and learning outside is important. And I'm familiar with that book that you mentioned. And so thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I will add, I've been talking with Tom quite a while about this gift, and loved being able to walk through the 30 acres and see the amazing trees and the understory and all that can be learned just about that in and of itself. And I think it's exciting what our classes will be able to experience and learn in that environment. So thank you.
I do want to mention one thing that has come up, and that is neighborhood access to the woods. There are a lot of people in the neighborhood who use these woods for recreation, for exercise, to cross-country ski, etc. I mentioned many of those things, and they don't know what's going to happen. And I told them, I don't know what's going to happen. It's completely up to you guys whether you want to invite the public in. Most schoolyards in this country are not fenced. This is part of the schoolyard. But if you have to do that, obviously that's your choice, because you now control the land, you own it. And so, but it is something to think about, to have these people have access to that, use it for whatever purposes they want. I will tell you, in the 50 years we have used it, it has never been abused by not but a handful of kids who did go on a destructive rampage once and strip the bark around a couple of trees, which their friends ratted them out, and I confronted them and their parents, and they, I think they learned, and that was something that was good. But you know, if you want people there, that's great. If you don't, that's your prerogative. I don't know what the safety issues are, and so, but think about it before you tell everybody they can't go back there. But my neighbors are aware that this may happen.
Well, thank you again very much, Mr. Tripp, to you and to Ellen. Like I said, a little bit later in the agenda, we will be voting to formally accept the gift, but I didn't want you to have to sit around and wait for us to get through the rest of the agenda.
Okay, well,
we appreciate it very much, though.
So if there's anything I can do to help you learn about it or manage it or whatever, let me know.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm leaving.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, bye-bye.
We are going to move on to our board committee reports. And Mrs. Mooring, if you're ready, we'll start with Finance and Facilities Committee.
Sure.
Okay.
On Tuesday, December 15th, we had our Finance and Facilities Committee meeting for the month of December. It was a full agenda. We had 6 agenda items, and I think maybe the largest part of the meeting was around the resolutions that we will be voting on tonight with regard to the certificates of participation sale and the bonds that are later in the agenda. We had our professionals from Baker Tilly, who have been advising us on those 2 items, did a presentation, and I thought it was terrific. So we took care of that. We reviewed the November financials and also the transfer and appropriations that are on tonight's agenda. And we talked about a new club, the Remote Control Club, which I think is pretty cool, and the funding of that. And then we did have one additional piece. There is also a resolution to adopt policy AA2, and that policy is relates to these resolutions. So it's kind of a package deal, if that makes sense. And that's our meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Mr. Campbell, do you have an update from Policy and Governance Committee?
I don't have anything for tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Chrysler, do you have an update from the COVID-19 Community Committee?
I do. We met yesterday, and I was thankful that Sue Wigging and Nurse Gunther did join us for that meeting. So they brought a level of expertise, I think, from the buildings that helped complement the rest of the task force. And certainly we were able to have some discussions, particularly with Sue there, as they're tracking the cases within the community and the quarantines within the community, within the school community specifically. We touched on overall just the environment and just kind of looking back, and we had a chance to process previously our trip to Chapel Field Middle School West and the high school to look at the COVID-19 precautions that we've already put in place and the investments that we've made. And the committee was, I think, unanimous in the fact that they felt that we were very robust with respect to our the display of PPE, the availability of PPE, but also the way that kids and teachers were distanced. The one thing that they pointed out very specifically and asked us to further really educate and communicate with the community about was the compliance. I think there was a lot of question before we started the school year as to whether or not, especially the young ones, would be mask compliant, and that would be something that would be difficult for them. And that was maybe one of the most consistent and surprising observation that we had as a group and that they had as individuals, was that the compliance rate was just, it was phenomenal, right? Which then kind of leads us into the next discussion that we had, which was really around statistics. We understand from Franklin County Health that while we did have a large number of students that were quarantined, we also made the decision to go back on to distance learning, also based on the fact that we needed to be able to staff everything from, you know, buses to classrooms to cafeteria spaces and janitorial responsibilities. But we really had a discussion or a question from about why does Franklin County tell us that they don't believe it's spreading in the school? And so we were able to talk to Sue Wigging a little bit about how we can start to track our cases that are coming out of quarantine, and hopefully looking at that data and making some correlations and being able to report that out to the community, which is going to help become another factor in, number one, I think, educating the community on exactly what's happening within the schools and where it's spreading. It might be an opportunity, quite frankly, for some public service announcements about if we can show statistically that it's not spreading in the schools, but we still see the high number of quarantines, it means we're not making good choices as families and individuals right outside of school, because we see that the measures that we're taking in school are actually stopping the spread. So if we want to keep kids in school and we want to keep, you know, extracurricular activities and clubs going, then we all have to be making these decisions, not just when the kids are at school, but when we're at home as well. And so we're hoping to gather some some statistical data within the next 2 weeks. And the goal would be to have this on the website so that people can go to it on a regular basis and see it. But that was something that was very important to the committee, Dr. Perry in particular, where if you're telling us it's not spreading in school, but we see 800 cases, how is the average parent supposed to make that correlation to understand why then we're also saying it's not spreading in the school? That also leads us to the microsite. We received an update from Hinda Mitchell and her team on how the microsite was coming along, and really just going through and brainstorming very briefly and at a high level about the type of information and data that would be on there. I mean, we really want this to be a space and a place where people can very easily come and get information and get their questions asked. And so that's shaping up pretty nicely. We think we're going to have a test site ready at the first week of January, but it probably will not launch until mid-January as a live site, just because there's so much data and so much information. The other piece of this that's important to remember, and I just want to remind the board and anybody that might be listening, is that things are changing so much with this pandemic, and even the introduction of a vaccine, things are still changing. So this microsite is going to be even more important, because we're going to need to be able to communicate those changes to people, and especially so that they don't understand that these aren't necessarily school district driven changes. These are changes from the outside world that are affecting us, and that's going to be important for communication. And finally, really then the next piece is policy. You know, we've been following Franklin County Health Department recommendations, which are based on CDC recommendations with respect to how quarantines are identified, notifications and things like that. But we're hearing more and more from the task force, and I think from other people, parents and teachers and staff in the district, that they want to see some sort of like visual representation and some sort of chart. And so we've been trying to stay away from creating our own materials, because we want to keep bringing people back to those websites, because those are the guiding documents with respect to policy. But we also think that there's some great flow charts there that can help people really understand, okay, if I'm a direct exposure, this is how that's been identified. This is why you're quarantining, and this is how many days, and this is why the school's telling you to do what they're telling you. And so we're hoping to have some of those finalized, those flow charts finalized as well, and also that we can put up on the website. So I think that was it. Did I miss anything, Mrs. Elliott or Mr. Barrett?
Good job.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, we're on public participation. There actually was one submission to the public participation form, although I don't think that this individual actually intended a public participation statement. The name was Thalia Johnson, and I think it came earlier in the month, but there was no statement that was attached. As the way that the form gets filled out, they can specify the topic, and in that specification they put none, and then in the comments they put none. So I don't believe that that person actually intended a public participation statement, but it would probably be good if nobody has followed up with her, if somebody could follow up with her just to make sure. I do not have any other public participation for this evening. Are there any changes that we need to make at all to this agenda? Okay, is there a motion then to approve the agenda as presented?
I'll move.
Sorry.
Is that Mrs. Mooring? And then a second from Mrs. Chrysler, I think.
Yes.
Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston. Mr. Hairston.
Oh.
Not sure if he can hear me.
Yes.
Mr. Hairston?
There he is.
Yes.
He
Okay.
said yes. Okay. We are on to the superintendent's report. So I will turn it over to you, Mr. Barrett.
Good evening.
Yeah, never mind. Sorry. Go ahead.
Good evening. I think I'm going to turn it over to Jill Elliott to talk about redistricting and high school program, and then I'll talk about what I need to talk about when she's done. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. You hopefully had a chance to take a look at it, but in the agenda later on, you'll be voting on the high school program of studies for next school year. Usually we have an entire Student Learning and Achievement Committee meeting dedicated to the program of studies. However, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about it with you tonight. I did send a brief note sheet along in your board docs file. As you know, each fall, Jason Bates, our academic officer at the high school, works to review the current program of studies and the available offerings. And they work to make, changes, additions, deletions. This year, those conversations started in September, and each department had a chance to weigh in. The changes this year were not significant. There are some name changes. There are some prerequisite updates, and I'll just highlight a few of those. The visual arts, under visual arts, computer art 1 and 2, traditionally that has been offered only for 10th through 12th graders, and that's been expanded now to be available for freshmen as well. We did remove one course in the program of studies for next year, and that was or the jewelry making courses, and that's because of historical data showing low interest, and we actually have not run those courses for 3 years. In the science area, just one that I will highlight is an update to the prerequisite for chemistry. They did add in a strong recommendation for the completion of Algebra 2, or to be taking Algebra 2 concurrently with chemistry. Before, it was just specific to physical science or biology. And so that was an addition based on recommendations from the department. Another prerequisite update that I'll highlight is related to music technology 2. And they added in they had successful completion of Music Tech 1, but also added in a strong recommendation of a final grade of C or higher. And that is specifically because they found students were often signing up for the second level course, not fully understanding the rigor of the course. And so they wanted to, just provide some more information there about how much rigor they might experience. We had a couple changes under English. African American Voice was changed from just being listed as an elective to also including, being allowable under the required courses. And then 11th grade English courses, 11th and 12th grade English courses are now both elective and required options also. And the changes there, depending on how students schedule their courses, once they meet their 4 English credit requirement, then the course may become an elective. So it really just kind of depends on how a student's schedule plays out. So those were some updates that you will see in the course of the program of studies. I did want to highlight just the timeline for scheduling. And I know a lot of middle school parents, this is the time of year they start to kind of get anxious about this process. So I wanted to share a little bit of information about that. Scheduling information sheets and important dates will be released on the 22nd. Middle school principals will be sending those out, and Mrs. Williams will be sending it out the high school. The week of January 25th, counselors will be holding virtual meetings for middle school and high school students to go over the scheduling process and answer questions that they have. And then after that, they will have open office hours during the lunch periods to kind of provide additional support to students as they're planning out their schedule and to answer any questions. On February 2nd, there will be an 8th grade parent scheduling meeting, and it will be virtual at 6:30. Prior to that presentation and that meeting, the presentation will actually be sent to families in advance, so they have a chance to take a look at it and come prepared to that meeting with questions. The scheduling window itself opens on February 3rd, which is the very next day, and will remain open until February 16th. And there will be multiple opportunities to connect with counselors, of course, and administrators along the way. But they will also be sharing 2 videos on the website and through email, one that's got just general scheduling information, and then one that kind of talks through the schedule planning process. So that's kind of a rundown of what families can expect. And certainly, you know, if families are having any specific questions, they can reach out to their school counselors or their administrators. The next topic I was going to just, I'm sorry, questions related to the program of studies.
How long does it typically take from the time that we approve the program of studies for it to get posted on the website for people to start to review?
I do not have, I don't know how long it typically takes, but I will follow up and work to get a rush on that.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. The next topic, I just wanted to give an update on our redistricting efforts. We did have our first redistricting committee meeting this afternoon. I think we had previously shared and had a presentation by Cooperative Strategies, who is a national educational planning firm that we are working with. We have 15 parent community members on our committee representing all grade levels, all buildings across the district. Today was just an informational meeting for the committee, introductions, helping them to understand the process. We did take a look at some data related to developable land and enrollment projections. And then when we get together in January, we will actually be working with the committee to develop boundary options. And so, you know, we did previously survey families, and so the committee will be taking a look at that information, and Cooperative Strategies will digitally, you know, break our district up into smaller plots of land, and the committee will be working to kind of, you know, move those plots around and develop different options. Once those options are created, we will be going back to the full community for feedback collection. And when families are filling out that feedback survey, they'll have the option to sign up for focus group time. And so that we will be hosting focus groups where families can choose to come to get more information, to learn more about the boundary options, and maybe share personally some of their feedback before the committee then comes back together to make some final tweaks and recommendations. So we had a good meeting today. Everyone was an active participant. We had lots of questions, and so we're excited about that process. And then, Mr. Barrett, I did actually have one more thing I wanted to share. We are getting ready to go on winter break. When we return from winter break, we actually have a professional development day in our calendar on Monday, January 4th. And the morning of the 4th, we will have a keynote speaker presentation for the entire staff by Kelly Capitosto, who is a representative from the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. And she will be talking with our teachers about implicit bias. Following that keynote, there will be a series of optional choice roundtable sessions for teachers, and they'll have, you know, the opportunity to choose what is most meaningful to them at this point in time. And so we're excited for that opportunity. And I do just want to say that as excited as we are about our teachers coming back for that PD, I am also really excited that they are hopefully going to get some much deserved rest and relaxation over the next couple weeks, because they are working so hard for our kids and families, and really, really deserve it. So, and that's all, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing over the holiday break for mental health services for our students. I think it's really important as we think about what the pandemic has done to students, to families, to really neighborhoods. And It's innovating. It's been a very lonely, isolating time. And so we want to provide help over the break by engaging some of our own counselors and Concord Counseling, who's been a partner with us for a number of years. So there will be office hours on most days over the break. There will be a hotline people can call. On page 11 of our agenda, we appreciate your patience tonight for letting us add this to the agenda. It's number 19, and 9 of our counselors across the district are going to be working with families on certain days. Lisa Kelly has done a lot of hard work to organize this in a very short amount of time. Just over the last 15, 16 hours, we've been talking about this. We created a video that will go out with information about office hours so that families have a place where they can go and check in and get help if they need it. This has been a very difficult week. It's been immensely sad, and it's really, really important that we wrap our arms around our community and our students, and we're there for them, and they have a place to call if they need help. And so that's what this is really all about. I appreciate the 9 individuals on our team that are going to work over the break. We're worried about them too. We want them to get rest. As Jill just said, everybody is affected by the pandemic, and there's lots of angst and there's lots of anxiety. And so our teachers need not just a physical break, but a mental health break as well. And so we're going to spread the days out across the weeks. The only day that service will not be provided, but there'll be some form of hotline, is Christmas Day and New Year's Day. We think this is really important. We're glad we're able to put it in place, and I think it's going to provide some much needed help. And throughout the week, throughout the break, we will pepper and layer in communication, reminding people of the numbers that they need to call if they need help. Also, I just want to talk a minute about returning to school and a little bit about our COVID task force. We really appreciate the ongoing flexibility and understanding our teachers, our staff, our families, our students have had. This has been a very, very challenging year. And our intention is to come back on January 5th, 2021. That's a Tuesday. We have a professional development day on January 4th. We've carefully reviewed recommendations from public health experts, from our COVID task force, from the Ohio Department of Health and Education, and also Franklin County Public Health. We really believe we can do the right thing and practice social distancing, wearing masks, good hand hygiene, and operate schools safely. Our bigger issue is really having so many staff in quarantine and students. Leading up to the break, we had the Thanksgiving break, we had 800 students in quarantine, and we had 87 teachers. So in the video we created, we've created another video that will go out after the Christmas holiday. We're asking for substitutes, anybody that can volunteer, and we're going to update the message of our return. The advice of the COVID task force has been very, very good. I'm glad that we were able to go and visit the schools, and they could see the diligent work that our principals, our teachers, our custodians, and students are doing. So really, it's so important in terms of mental health and academics to be back in school, and that's what we're going to try to do on the 5th. With that, I think I just want to mention also that we're very grateful to our community for the passage of issue 22. The recount was completed just recently, and We sent out a request for quotations for architects, and over the break, we'll be going through the responses, and we will be interviewing architectural firms, and we should have a recommendation for an architect or multiple architects on all of the projects at our board meeting in January. I want to just reiterate that our hearts and our minds and our prayers are with Noah Long's family. And it's just an immensely sad thing to lose a student. And we're all so mindful of that. And we're thinking of them and keeping them in our thoughts and prayers, and all of our students that this has affected. And I just want to, I have so much appreciation for Jessica Williams and her team at the high school, and our cross-country coaches who have been there for Noah's teammates, so Ryan Beck and Ryan Callahan. And I've talked to Ryan Callahan about plans about connecting with students over the break to check in on them, and they have just done an amazing job, being with families and trying to be present as everyone grieves. So just amazing work by all of them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett and Mrs. Elliott. Any other questions from board members about the superintendent's report? Okay, we will move on to the treasurer's report. Mr. Verlingo.
Okay, thank you. We have 8 items this evening on the report. The first, if I can share my screen. Okay, if we look at, just briefly, since we covered the information at the Finance Committee, so it's somewhat redundant to go into any detail, I think, at the board meeting. But in terms of where we are year to date, we're currently about 1.5 million over estimates for revenues, 900,000. This is in local receipts, 900,000 versus prior year. 330,000 over in state resources, and about 400,000 under prior year. The prior year underrun is because last year we were receiving more funds on a monthly basis, and then we saw the large reduction at year end when they reduced our budget by 1.6 million. So we'll continue to underrun that until end of the year, when it should kind of equalize out, since the current year funding from the state is at the same level as the reduced amount from fiscal year 20. On the tax side, we're running slightly ahead of last year on tax receipts, but about 900,000 over on tax abatement revenue. There was a large receipt earlier from an Easton TIF. I think part of that was that it was more front loaded. So we will right now projected to receive additional revenues in TIF for the year, but it should not be a million over. It'll be something less than that. In non-operating, this 400,000 or so occurred last month when we received a refund of run-out reserve relative to our self-insurance fund. So 80% of that was returned to the general fund as a prior year reduction of expenditure. 20% was included in the self-insurance fund, which is currently still in existence. There is a question as to whether or not that will exist next fiscal year. So it could be an audit issue, since we're no longer, for this fiscal year, we're no longer self-insured. So we may need to just reclassify how that is being tracked. On the expenditure side, 1.9 million under expenditures predominantly due to timing, but there are some underruns in run rates that are occurring relative to operations, fuel, electricity, and other things related to buildings. Most of this will even out for the rest of the year. Fringe benefits are over because of some payments that occur earlier in the year that are smoothed out in later months. And salaries and benefits are currently under, but that will catch up as we finalize all of the retro adjustments. Right now, though, I am projecting salaries and wages will underrun by maybe 100,000 to 200,000 for the fiscal year. That could be offset by payments made to retirees. If we have a large number of retirees, the transfer to the severance fund would not be adequate, and we will need to increase that funding. So net salaries and wages are, I think, effectively on forecast for the year. In terms of the historical averages and the run rates, as you can see, tax receipts have increased as millage has increased and/or property valuations, although we tend to only see increases on inside millage. Tax abatement revenue has trended up so that we are seeing some additional revenues there. But overall, since state funding has declined, the percentage between state and local resources has pretty much trended down on the state side from 25 down to 22, currently at 21.1%, where the local resource and local burden has continued to increase. On the investment side, again, we are mostly 97 or 8% invested at all times in some kind of interest-bearing securities, combination of certificates of deposits, federal agency bonds, and some commercial paper. So the overall return, if I can see that, it depends, 1.7% on CDs, 1.1 on agencies, 0.3 on commercial paper, because that's short-term in nature. We're basically returning quite a bit more than what current interest rates are, because some of this money was invested a while ago, over several years. The good news is, based upon passage of the levy, we will not need to dip into any of these investments early in terms of potentially selling them. So we can hold them to maturity and reap the yield that they're getting. And just a quick summary of our cash at 38 million. The bulk of it is current and or within this fiscal year. Mostly 15 million is for the construction project for Lincoln Elementary. And most of the other investments are relatively short term. Any questions on finances? Okay, second item is donations. We had a number of donations from various sources of various amounts. This does not include the land donation, which is listed as number 8. Thanking the community and everyone who continues to generously support our schools. The third item is the amendment for appropriations and revenues. The increase in general fund of 1.3 million relates primarily to special ed services and then some additional PPE that we anticipate incurring additional expenses for the rest of the year. The other increases in revenue and expenditures are due to carryovers in each of the grants. So those are non-general fund operating items. Number 4 is a new student club called the Remote Control Club. Mr. Barrett, would you want to make a comment or two about this? Because I think you can much better speak to this than.
Yeah, so that's a club that is meant to be inclusive. It's hands-on. It involves motors and computers, and it involves teaching special education students and other students, regular education students, hand-eye coordination. There's social connections. When you have a club that is cross-categorical, it involves students who are on individual education plans and individualized instructional programs and regular ed students. It's just a great opportunity. So it's great that we have this club, and our teacher at the high school, Jordan Kessler, is the one leading it. And it's a great opportunity for kids.
Okay, thank you. Number 5 is a transfer of funds for debt service relative to the tax anticipation note that was passed several years ago. So this is tax revenue received in the permanent improvement fund and then transferred to debt service to make the debt payments. So the total payments for this fiscal year is $831,700. And then there's a $1,000 transfer from the GJ Education Foundation to the S Club in support of that for personal care products for students. Number 6 is approving amend appropriations and revenues, an increase in revenue related to student managed activity, so a corresponding increase in the appropriation, and a reduction in coronavirus relief broadband connectivity grant. We originally applied for pretty much the maximum that we could receive. This particular piece was not approved, although about 50% of that was recaptured. Mr. Blackwell did apply through E-rate funding to recapture about 50% of that cost. So that was a definite plus from IT to pursue that option. Number 7 is a request to the county auditor for advances of taxes. So if we request, the auditor will advance funds as they become available on tax receipts. Those typically start near the end of January. So in order to facilitate cash flow, we definitely want to request those advances. Otherwise, we would not receive a settlement until sometime in March. And that would put a strain on our available cash to meet expenditures going forward. And then number 8, finally, is the donation from Mr. and Mrs. Tripp, the 30 acres behind High Point Elementary that was discussed earlier. Certainly that, and I assume that's for the purpose of a land lab or environmental education program, which I think would be a great benefit to students.
Mike, do you want to talk about the bond at just a high level that starts on page 13, ends on, I think, 25?
You want to talk about that now or when we?
You want to talk about it when we get there? Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Any board members have questions for Mr. Verlingo about the financial report, the treasurer's report? Sorry. Okay, is there a motion to, I think we have 8 items for business. Unless there's an objection to taking those together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 8 under letter C?
I'll move this, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hairston, any additional discussion? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll?
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We are on letter D, page 5. There are 4 items for action under educational pupil programs and services. Unless there is an objection to taking those items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 4 under letter D?
So
move.
moved.
Mrs. Mooring, is there a second? Was that Mr.
Yes.
Hairston?
Second, yeah.
Thank you. Any discussion about these items? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
There are 21 items under letter E, Human Resources. Unless there is an objection to taking those items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 21 under letter E, Human Resources?
I'll move, Mrs. Chrysler.
Thanks, Mrs. Chrysler. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Any discussion about these items? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll?
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Yes. There are 9 items under letter F, general business. Unless there's an objection to taking those items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 9 under letter F?
I'll move.
Mr. Hairston, is there a second?
A second.
Mrs. Mooring? Any discussion? Maybe let's talk about the resolutions.
Okay. Would you like me to speak
Sure.
on bonds and the COPS issue? Okay.
Yeah, I know we had some conversation as a board and finance committee, but just for anyone who might be watching, if you could just kind of give an overview, that would be great.
Okay. What resolution to approve the issuance of bonds and the next resolution issuance for the issuance of the COPS, certificates of participation. These basically allow the superintendent, myself, and in cases, some cases, board president, to take all action necessary in order to issue the bonds, secure financing, engage the firms or anyone needed in order to make this happen between now and the projected date when we anticipate selling the bonds, which would be sometime in February. Also to make any decisions relative to the taxable and non-taxable structure of the bonds. And they are limited. For example, the bond resolution, what was passed by the voters is $205,665,000. So we are limited to sell that exact amount of bonds, cannot be exceeded for a term of 37 years. The millage on the ballot was 4.93, but the millage in this resolution is set at 3.71. So we had told the voters during the campaign that the millage or that would be placed on the duplicate would be lower due to the increase in valuations. That did occur. This actually, due to some of the, let's say, estimates that needed to be made at the time that these were originally priced and placed on the ballot, interest rates have moved slightly in our favor. There was a little bit of a hedge put in because those interest rates could have moved against us. So effectively, what we had told the voters it would cost for the 4.93 mils is going to be something less than that. So there will be savings over what we initially told them it would cost per $100,000 of valuation. The resolution for the COPS, which is certificates of participation, they act similar to bonds. but they're not actually bonds. What we basically do is provide security to whoever invests in these vehicles. They become the lessor. So we're basically leasing back our own property, and then we pay it back over time exactly the same way we would do a bond, but they're not actually bonds. So they carry a little bit more risk than bonds, because bonds, basically the county auditor is required to collect all the debt service necessary for those bonds. Whereas in this case, we're limited to the millage that was passed on the ballot of 1.5 related to the permanent improvement levy. Therefore, we can never collect more than that amount of millage. So if we financed an excessive amount, we would not have the necessary funding to pay it back. So that makes it more restrictive. It's also more limited to an annual appropriation by the board. So investors see this as slightly more risky. Our AA2 rating, currently, CALPs usually carry a slightly lower rating, so they're slightly higher costs. So these typically would carry a AA3 due to that potential risk of appropriation. And these would, we certainly have a difference between taxable rates and non-taxable rates. So the goal here would be to sell all COPs at the non-taxable rate to get the lowest potential interest. Whereas on the bonds, we can do a combination of taxable, non-taxable, given that there are spending requirements by the IRS. If we issue all non-taxable debt, we would have to spend X% of that in year 1 and year 2, depending upon how quickly we can actually expend those funds. It would cause us to have a problem with the taxability or non-taxability of those issues to whoever purchases them. That would be a major default on our side if we could not meet those spending requirements. So that's why the mix of taxable, non-taxable becomes a critical decision here when we actually go to price and sell the bonds. We have put together we've interviewed 4 firms as a syndicate in terms of selling the bonds. And we have a good idea as to who we would like to lead that activity, but that will not be announced until tomorrow. Are there any questions related to the issues?
Thank you, Mr. Verlingo. Board members have any questions or comments about any, I guess, these resolutions or any of the other items in this section under general business?
So on page 33, number 9, starts that final resolution with regard to post-issuance compliance, and that becomes a policy, correct? For our district?
Yes, we, I guess previously with the issues that had been sold by the district, this policy was not maybe required at that time, but for any new issues of bonds, we're required to have a post-issuance compliance policy. Therefore, it's included with this. What this basically does is require the treasurer to monitor anything that could positively or negatively affect the because investors, they will then become tradable in the secondary market. So people who have purchased these bonds may choose to sell them. If, for example, our debt rating decreased from AA2 to AA3, that could have a material impact on the price of that bond because it's now less creditworthy. An investor who believed that we had a AA2 rating and now we're at AA3 and we did not inform, there's a federal system where you go in and update information relative to this. If we did not take action within a short period of time to notify them that the bond rating had changed, we could be liable for damages. So this is critical in that we would, between myself and bond counsel, to monitor activity related to the bond issue and any events that occur in the district that could impact the collectability of those bonds.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Piccolantonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring.
Yes.
Okay, we are on board reports and discussions. I know I said I would have a legislative update in December, but it is going to wait until January because as of the time that our board meeting started, both the House and Senate were still in session. So I will wait and give a full legislative update over everything that happened in lame duck in January. Mr. Campbell, do you have any report from Eastland Fairfield?
I do not have a report at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barrett, do you have any report from Gahanna Parks and Rec?
Their meeting was
You're on.
this month. Sorry, I wasn't sure if he was gonna
He's
end.
muted, I think. I can't tell.
Their meeting was canceled this month, so no
Yes.
update.
That's what
Okay.
I was saying, sorry.
That's okay, thanks. Mrs. Mooring, do you have any update or report as the local government liaison?
No, we were hoping to have our next step meeting with the city of Gahanna. That did not happen, so we will continue to work on that as the new year begins.
Okay, thank you. And I know you have already given us your Gahanna Jefferson Education Foundation report. Mr. Hairston, do you have a report from Insurance Committee?
Yes, we met yesterday. First thing, there was a question as to the frequency of our meetings quarterly, and there was concern that from our last meeting in July, that we did not meet what was required. And there was a question as to, was it noted in the minutes? And yes, it was actually noted in the minutes that the meeting would be postponed or rescheduled after the renewal information was received. We also, at that time, said that we were going to set a schedule for 2021 and keep it on a quarterly basis. However, we're looking at February, May, September, and October, just because of June being school, people being out of school, things like that. We also, it came back that for 2021, we're looking at a 2.5% renewal premium versus the 10%. And it appears that we incurred a 84.5% loss ratio between 7/1/2019 to 6/30/2020, which was that greater than 10%. Also, the benefit limits, they actually returned to the 12-month benefit period versus the 18 months that we were going on under when we first got into the contract. There was discussion about the HDHP option 1 or the MOU and approval of a plan change, which we were non-compliant. It was proposed that we raise the deductible to meet the IRS minimum, lower the co-insurance, and keep out of pocket the same. And there was actually 10 people with HSA that were impacted by this. There was discussion that open enrollment was completed. COVID-19 test and treatment was going to be covered until 12/31/20 at 100%. There was a dental renewal. I guess there was a 0% for 12 months or 1.27 for 24 months, which we were looking at going at the 1.27 for 24 months. Administratively, our cost goes from $3.95 to $4, so only about a nickel. And the vision rate, it basically stayed the same because it was set for 42 months. And there was a reminder that there was $20,000 wellness funds that needs to be used by 12/31. And the wellness allowance was capped at 29% cap versus the 25%. Other than that, that was pretty much it.
Thanks, Mr. Hairston. Any other items from any other board members? Okay. We do have a motion to go into executive session. Well, does somebody want to, is there, sorry. Oh, it's been a long week. Is there a motion to go into executive session pursuant to revised code 121.22G4 for the purpose of preparing for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees?
I'll move.
Thank you, Mrs. Chrysler. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you,
Campbell.
Mr. Campbell. Any discussion? Okay, for anyone out there watching, when we go into executive session, we will be going into a separate virtual environment. We do have to come back into this live stream, into the public part of the meeting after executive session, but the only board action we will be taking after executive session is to adjourn the meeting. Does everybody have a link to the virtual meeting room for executive session who needs to be there? Okay, everybody needs to sign out of the Zoom and I will see you all in executive session. Thanks.
We have to vote.
Oh, yes, we do. We do need to vote. Mr. Berlingo, can you call the roll? Thank you.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
So I think he left.
who left? Ms.
I'm
Chrysler?
so sorry.
Yes. Okay.
Mr. Hairston?
Yes.
Okay, now we will go
Now
into
we can-
executive session. Thank you, guys. Okay, it is 9:47 PM and we are out of executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Thank you, Mr.
Matt?
Tucker. Is there a second?
I have Daphne.
Thank you. Any discussion? Can you call the roll one more time, Mr. Verlingo?
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler.
Yes.
So 9:47.
We're adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Happy holidays.